Have you ever sat quietly in a familiar room, sunlight spilling across the floor, everything around you still and peaceful? And yet, inside, there's a heaviness you can't quite name. It's not a pain in the back or an ache in your knees. It's something deeper, a silence that doesn't feel warm anymore, just hollow. Aging is often spoken of in terms of memory, fading steps, slowing or restless nights. But have you ever wondered, what if the heaviest burden we carry through this life isn't in the body, but in the heart? Unmet expectations, unhealed relationships, things we've held on to for so long we don't even remember why. And maybe, just maybe, these are the very things quietly keeping joy from blooming. If you've ever felt that way, perhaps it's time. Not to add more to your life, but to let go. Gently, I invite you to join me on a journey through Buddhist truths. Truths we can begin to release starting today. Part 1. Letting go of the fear of aging. Aging is not a decline, it's the flowering of wisdom. There's a quiet moment in every life when you look in the mirror and barely recognize the person looking back. The forehead has softened. The skin isn't as firm. Your shoulders and legs move slower, more tenderly. And yet, there's still a light in your eyes, like a small lantern that continues to burn, even after life's winds have blown through again and again. Many people fear growing old, not because of age itself, but because of what age brings: change, letting go, silence. You're no longer called upon like before, no longer needed to fix big things. The children are grown, friends drift away. Each day repeats with the same familiar sounds: the ticking clock, the kettle boiling, and the quiet. And then you may begin to ask yourself, am I old now? If we're not mindful, that question can turn into fear, a silent worry that life is slowly withdrawing from us. But the Buddha taught, all things are impermanent. Trees must shed their leaves to bear fruit. The moon must wax and wane to shape life's rhythm. So why should we fear this natural season we're entering? There's a Zen story of an old monk once admired for his serenity, wisdom, and radiant presence. People came not just for his teachings, but for the deep peace he carried. As years passed, his hair turned white, his hands trembled, his steps slowed. One day, a young novice gently asked, "Master, do you feel sad that your body isn't what it used to be?" The old monk smiled, placed his hand over his chest, and replied, "This body is like a lantern. The oil may be running low, the flame may flicker, but the light is still here. Can you see the light? That answer so simple, yet it awakens something deep within us. Growing older doesn't make us weaker. It strips away what's on the outside, the noise, the titles, the roles. And what's left is the inner light, the one that never dimmed. I once met a woman named Grace at a tea meditation in California. She was 89. Her face wore the lines of many lived seasons, but her eyes were candlelight. She said something I'll never forget. I used to fear aging. Now, I see each wrinkle as a prayer bead, every line a whispered blessing for the life I've lived and the journey still unfolding. Yes, when we stop fearing old age, we begin to truly live within it. The stillness of aging is not a loss. It's a return, a sacred space where wisdom begins to blossom. Youth is fiery and loud, but often restless. Old age is gentle and still, and that stillness becomes the richest soil for awakening. Think about it. A stirred bowl of water cannot reflect its depths. Only when it settles can we see what's underneath. In the same way, it's often in our later years that our hearts become quiet enough to see clearly. So instead of asking, "Why am I aging?" try asking, "What is aging here to teach me? Who am I being invited to become now?" Sometimes, aging is not the end. It's a beginning, a doorway into a new journey of reflection, surrender, and spiritual ripening. And if anyone ever asks, "Am I becoming less?" I would gently answer, "No, dear one. You are becoming deeper." Part 2. Letting go of the silence around your inner pain. Some pains don't have a name. There's no noise, no tears, just a quiet heaviness in your chest when you walk into an old room. A subtle ache when you stumble upon a forgotten photo. A breeze through the window on a random afternoon, and suddenly your heart hurts for no clear reason. Many elders say things like, "That's the past. No use bringing it up or talking won't change anything." And so, silence. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because we think that keeping it buried is safer. No one gets hurt. No one judges. No one blames. But silence doesn't make the sadness disappear. It just moves inward quietly. It settles into the body, becomes a racing heartbeat for no reason, turns into restless sleep, or into tears you can't even explain. The Buddha once taught, what is repressed doesn't disappear. It resurfaces just in another form, sometimes as sudden anger, a deep, prolonged sigh, or even an unexplained illness. There was an old man I once met. His name was Harold, in his early 80s, widowed, living alone. He told me that for over 40 years, he had never spoken a word about the death of his only son, who died in a car accident at 20. He said, "I was afraid that if I spoke it out loud, I'd fall apart. So I buried it, sealed it away." But over time, his body began to weaken. Doctors found nothing seriously wrong, but he was always tired, always low, no will to live. Only when he joined a tea, meditation circle, holding a warm cup, and letting a few tears fall, did he finally whisper, "I miss my son." Just 5 words. But 5 words he had swallowed for 4 decades. And from that moment on, he started to live again. Not because the pain vanished, but because he stopped running from it. I'll never forget that moment, because it taught me something powerful. Healing doesn't begin with medicine, it begins with honesty, the courage to face your wounds, the willingness to name your sorrow, not to complain, not to blame, but simply to breathe again after all those years of holding it in. Have you ever noticed this? When we get a physical wound, if we hide it, don't clean, it Don't bandage it. Does it heal? No. It swells. It festers. It becomes chronic. The heart is the same. If something hurts, look at it with mindfulness, with compassion. Like sunlight touching a dusty corner, you don't have to clean it right away. Just shine light on it, and the dust begins to lift. The Buddha never taught us to hide our tears. He said, let emotions pass like clouds. Don't cling. Don't push away. Just notice and smile. If there's something you've never said, something stuck in your heart for years, maybe you don't need to tell anyone. Maybe you just need to tell yourself. Write it down. Whisper it during meditation. Or simply place a hand over your heart and take a deep breath. I know. It's still in me, and I allow it to be here. No resistance, no hate, just presence. Sometimes that's the very first step to return to yourself. Not a perfect version of you, but the real one, wounded, courageous, and slowly healing. Part 3. Let go of comparing yourself to the young. There are moments, quiet and unexpected, when you catch yourself watching a young person walk by. Their posture straight, their voice clear, eyes bright, and their body full of energy. And then a soft whisper arises inside. I used to be like that once. That's how comparison begins. So gently, so naturally. And if you're not careful, that simple thought can quietly grow into a feeling of emptiness, like you've lost something you can never get back. Have you ever looked at an old photo of yourself and felt your heart tighten? I was beautiful back then and didn't even know it. I wish I were still that strong. These aren't complaints, but they subtly create a ruler, and we start measuring the present against the past, measuring today's slower pace against yesterday's swiftness, measuring the quiet of old age against the laughter of youth. And the result, we end up feeling less. But my friend, do you realize, is this: comparing yourself to the young, or even to your younger self, is one of the most subtle forms of suffering. It's not as loud as regret, not as fierce as anger, but it quietly erodes your joy. The Buddha said, the wise do not compare. The wise look deeply and understand, because every season of life carries its own beauty, its own meaning. Youth is like a rushing stream. Old age is a deep and still well. One overflows with energy. The other holds quiet wisdom. One travels outward to discover the world. The other journeys inward to understand the self. Think about it. If you wanted to see your reflection clearly, would you look into rushing water or into stillness? Peace doesn't come from speed. Peace comes from stillness. And that stillness, that is the gift aging, is offering you, if you're willing to receive it. I'm reminded of a story about an old monk and his young disciple. The disciple was full of energy, quick, clever, always speaking with ease. The old teacher moved slowly, his hands, shaky eyes dim. One day, the disciple asked, Master, do you ever miss the days when you were young and strong? The old monk smiled gently and replied, Do you see the well behind the temple? When I was young, the water was shallow. The reflection was unclear. As I aged, the well grew deeper. The water grew still. Now when I look in, I can finally see myself clearly. That answer, like a breeze through the trees, carries a truth we all need to hear. Youth is not always clarity, and old age is not the end. The real tragedy isn't growing older. It's never having lived fully at any age. I once met a woman named Miriam, 84 years old, full of strength and wit. She told me she used to avoid her granddaughter's dance recitals, not because she didn't care, but because every time she watched it made her heart ache. She dances so beautifully, and watching her, I'd remember when I used to move like that. Then I'd go home feeling heavy, so I stopped going. But one day, she said, I chose to go again. But this time, I watched not with regret, but with love. And I cried not because of what I'd lost, but because I realized I can still love. I can still feel joy. I don't need to be the one performing to be moved by beauty. You see, when we stop turning other people's joy into our sadness, that's when we begin to grow spiritually mature. Youth may have the fresh scent of a blooming flower, but old age carries the deep fragrance of a flower in full bloom. And once again, I gently remind you, don't measure your present with the ruler of your past. Don't let someone else's light dim the quiet glow within your own soul. Because true light never competes. It just shines softly, fully, and without apology. And if you ever feel your heart starting to compare, pause, take a deep breath, and whisper to yourself, I don't need to be like anyone else. I just need to be enough for myself. That is the beginning of true peace in aging. Part 4. Letting go of the old definition of self-worth. Who were you? A devoted mother, a hard-working father, a respected teacher, manager, colleague, someone who was always busy, always needed. And then, one day, all those roles begin to fade. No more Monday morning meetings, no more urgent phone calls, no one asking, what do you think we should do? You're still here. You're still you. But part of you starts to feel unnecessary. I've met many elders who quietly carry this thought. I'm not anyone anymore. Because they've tied their self-worth to their job, their roles, their responsibilities. And when those roles slowly disappear, they feel like a hollow shell. But let me remind you of something. Your true worth was never in a business card, a nameplate, or a title. It was in your presence, in your mindfulness, in the quiet light of awareness that's always been within you. I once met a woman named Evelyn who had just retired. She had been a high school principal for 40 years, managing planning, solving every problem under the sun. But after retirement, she told me, I feel useless. As teacher, I don't make decisions anymore. No one needs my opinion. I just sit at home and feel invisible. I didn't respond right away. I simply invited her to sit down with a warm cup of tea. And then I asked gently, when was the last time you really noticed sunlight dancing through the leaves? She paused and then said softly, it's probably been decades. I smiled. Maybe your worth no longer lies in making decisions. Maybe it lies in sitting still, in breathing, in listening, in simply coming home to yourself without needing to be anything at all. You see, society teaches us to become successful, helpful, responsible. But the Buddha teaches us to return to the original mind, where you don't have to prove anything. You just have to be here and know that you're alive. You are not your roles. You are awareness shining quietly from within. In youth, we measure worth by achievements. In midlife, by responsibility. But at a certain point, when both start to fade, you're invited into a higher chapter. A life no longer defined by definitions. I remember someone once said, "When I stopped being someone, I finally became myself." You don't need to do anything grand. Just step outside in the early morning light. Place a hand over your heart and feel this simple truth. I'm still here, and I am enough. Letting go of the old definitions isn't a loss. It's a doorway, a space to rediscover yourself, not through titles or praise, but through peace. You no longer have to carry. You no longer have to impress. You just have to be real. Because the light within you has never depended on the outside world. It only needs one thing, your permission to shine. And maybe, just maybe, this moment right now is when you finally give it that permission. Not for anyone else, but because you deserve to be fully, deeply, peacefully yourself. Part 5. Letting go of the expectation that others will make you happy. There are some afternoons that feel quiet, not in a sad way, not because something happened, but because nothing really did. The house is still. The clock ticks gently in the background. Sunlight softens through the windows. And you sit there with a silence that you can't quite name. You're not exactly sad, but you're not joyful either. You're not crying, but you're not smiling. And then a quiet question drifts across your mind. Why hasn't anyone called me today? Do my children or my grandkids ever think of me? You may not say it out loud, but that thought lingers like an echo in the heart. I've met many elders who feel this way. They're not lonely because no one's around. They have families. They have neighbors. But still, something feels missing. They feel left behind. They wait for a call, for someone to ask how they're feeling, for a reason to feel important again. And when that call doesn't come, they feel invisible. But here's the thing. In that waiting, without even realizing it, we hand the key to our happiness to someone else. We stop being the caretakers of our own peace. We begin living in a quiet contract. I'll feel valuable when someone reminds me I am. The Buddha once said, "No one saves us but ourselves." At first, that sounds harsh, but in truth, it's one of the most compassionate teachings there is. Because if happiness depends on someone else, we'll spend our lives waiting. But if we gently turn inward and realize I can care for my own heart, then something incredible happens. Peace no longer depends on what's missing outside. It begins when we stop asking the outside to fix the inside. I once met an elderly man named Edward at a meditation group in California. He told me I used to be a good husband, a devoted father. But after my wife passed and the kids moved away, I felt like a dried-up tree. No one watered me anymore. I asked, "So what did you do with that feeling?" He smiled. I sat with it, and then I realized no one's coming to water me anymore. But I can still find the underground stream inside myself. He started walking every morning. He took up watercolor painting. He volunteered at the local library reading to children. No one handed him happiness. He created it for himself. And that's the quiet turning point. The day you stop waiting to be made happy is the day you start gently nurturing your own soul. You make your own tea. You play your favorite soft music. You write in your journal. You walk in the morning sun. And in those small moments, you are planting seeds of happiness from within, quietly, calmly, but deeply. Happiness isn't loud laughter. It isn't someone sitting beside you 24/7. Sometimes happiness is simply being able to sit alone and not feel empty. And if you ever think, but I'm too old to start anything new, let me remind you, as long as you're still breathing, you can still bloom. Try placing your hand on your chest and gently asking, what did I do today to care for my own heart because you deserve joy? Not because someone gave it to you, but because there is still light in your heart, and you can choose to turn it on anytime you wish. Part 6. Let go of clutter. Physical, emotional, and mental. Have you ever opened an old drawer and paused for a moment, not quite sure why? Why your heart suddenly felt heavy? A shirt you haven't worn in years. A birthday card from a friend you no longer talk to. A little box of tiny objects, but somehow touching them brings a lump to your throat. We often think of clutter as just a mess of physical things. But in truth, clutter is unprocessed memory. It's fragments of the past we haven't released. It's old emotions we don't realize we've been carrying for far too long. The Buddha once said, "Let go of the past. Let go of the future. Let go of the present." When the mind is free, you go beyond birth and death. That may sound lofty, but it's actually deeply practical. Because if you don't let go, you won't just fill your room, you'll fill your mind. You'll go to sleep with thoughts you never folded away. You'll wake up in a space full of dust. Not the dust of things, but the dust of the old and unlived. I once met a woman named Lena at a tea meditation gathering. She brought fresh fruits and flowers to the temple every week. Everyone praised her kindness, but I noticed her eyes always looked distant, like her heart was never fully there. One day I asked gently, "Why don't you stay and meditate with us?" She smiled sadly. "My house, it's just too full. Too many things, too many memories." She shared about her large home, once a warm family space, now occupied by just her and her stuff, her late husband's belongings, her grown children's things, even her own unused, untouched. "I can't throw them away," she said, her eyes watering, "because if I do, it feels like I'm erasing a part of my life." I didn't answer right away. I picked up an apple she had brought and held it out. Then I asked, "Can you hold another apple if your hands are already full with this one?" She shook her head. "So how can peace enter?" I said, "if your hands and heart are already too full." You see, we hold on to things not because we need them, but because we're afraid. Afraid of losing memories, afraid of having nothing left to remind us, afraid of the emptiness that comes when a few familiar objects suddenly disappear. But emptiness is not loss. Emptiness is an invitation. An empty space is how the new breeze comes in, just like an empty cup can finally be filled with tea. Only a quiet heart can receive peace. I once visited an old man named Walter. After selling his 5-bedroom house, he moved into a small cottage by the woods. I asked, "Do you miss your old things?" He smiled and said no, because now, every morning I wake up and see sunlight on the floor, not dust on the shelves. That answer stayed with me, because light can only enter when we make space for it. And memories don't live in attic boxes or old drawers or storage bins. Memories live in you. You don't need to hold on to everything to remember someone. You don't need to cling to every object to keep a part of your life. You can hold it in your heart without holding it in your hands. You can remember without gripping. You can love and still let go gently. So the next time you open a drawer and find something you haven't used in years, ask yourself softly, am I keeping this because I need it or because I'm afraid? And if the answer is fear, maybe it's time to release. Not to lose, but to feel lighter, to give your heart space to breathe again, to let the light come into your room and to your life. Part 7. Let go of the belief that there's nothing left to learn. Have you ever felt like the world no longer expects anything from you, like at a certain age, you're just supposed to sit still, look back, and take care of your health? No one ever says it directly, but you can feel it. This quiet pressure from society that only the young are allowed to explore, to fail to learn. And you're just expected to settle down. I've met many elders who quietly carry this belief. They've worked hard, given their all, carried the weight of a lifetime, and now, as they enter the age of rest, they believe they've learned enough, that their minds aren't sharp anymore, that new ideas are for the young. And so, they stop. But here's the truth. It's not aging that withers us, it's a closed mind. When we stop learning, we begin to dry up inside. A mind that stops opening is like a tree. Without roots, it may still be standing, but it no longer receives nourishment. The Buddha once taught, as long as the mind is learning, you are alive. The moment it believes it knows enough, it begins to die. Look at a child. They are vibrant because they always ask why. They are joyful because they're not afraid to learn again and again. And strangely enough, any elder who still carries that spirit has a heart as light as a child's. I once heard a story about an old monk named Anand. He was over 80 years old, and yet every morning he would bow before his teacher's altar and chant a familiar sutra, as if he were reading it for the very first time. A young novice once asked him, "Master, you've recited the same sutra for decades. Why do you still read it like it's new?" The old monk smiled gently and replied, "Because my mind today is not the same as yesterday. Each day is a new lifetime. And this sutra today, it might teach me something I never saw before." That answer was simple, but deeply moving, not because the sutra changed, but because the one learning had never stopped opening his heart. I remember a woman named Clara, 76 years old, living alone after her husband passed. During a meditation session, she shared something surprising. She was learning Chinese. Everyone gasped a little. Why now? What for? She laughed softly. I don't have a grand reason. I'm just curious. I want to see how flexible my brain still is. The whole room smiled, not out of disbelief, but because we all saw something glowing in her. Learning isn't just about becoming something. Learning how the heart keeps breathing, keeps blooming. Many older people hesitate to begin again, afraid of being wrong, being slow, being less than. But have you ever flipped the question? If you're learning simply to feel alive, to stay curious, to keep your inner world moving, what is there to fear? Young people learn to step out into the world, but older people, they learn to go deeper into themselves. And inside each of us is a universe waiting to be discovered. It doesn't have to be learning a new language like Clara. It could be learning to sit still without feeling restless, learning to cook something new, learning to listen without interrupting, learning to forgive yourself. All of that is learning. All of that is life. And all of that is proof that you are never without value. So if someone, maybe even you, has ever thought, I'm too old to learn anything new, I invite you to look at a lotus. It doesn't bloom when it's young. It blooms after spending time in the mud, after the right light, after the right warmth and cold. And when it blooms, it doesn't chase anything. It simply knows it's time. You're like that too. If today, even a small part of you wants to understand something new, try something different, ask a question, then congratulations. You're still living, not just existing. And that is a beautiful thing. Part 8. Letting go of toxic relationships without guilt. As we grow older, we begin to crave something incredibly simple: peace. Not just the kind of silence you can hear, but the kind of stillness you can feel inside. The kind where you don't flinch every time the phone rings, where you no longer tense up before a visit, where you don't have to mentally prepare before someone drops by. Have you ever felt that way? That there are people, maybe friends, relatives, even family, and yet every time they show up, something inside you tightens. It's not because you don't love them, but because you're tired. Tired of being blamed, tired of being controlled, tired of expectations you can never live up to. But then you tell yourself, they're my family. I should just endure it. I'm older now. I should be more patient. And so you keep enduring. You hold on to the relationship, not because it nourishes you, but because you're afraid that letting go would make you a bad person. I once heard the story of a young monk named Nalin. In the monastery, everyone knew him as kind and respectful, but there was always a quiet sadness in his eyes. One day, his teacher gently asked him what was on his mind. After a long pause, Nalin finally admitted, "Every month, I write a letter to my older brother, but every reply is just another round of anger. He brings up the past. He blames me, but he's my brother. I can't stop writing." The teacher didn't answer right away. He simply looked out into the garden, then pointed to a fallen bamboo branch. "Do you see that branch? It used to be part of the tree, but when it no longer belonged, it let go and fell. Did the tree curse it, or did it simply keep growing?" Nalin sat quietly for a long while, and then his eyes softened, not because he chose to hate his brother, but because he chose to stop suffering. You have that right too. You have the right to choose peace without apologizing for it. The Buddha once said, "Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned." Toxic relationships filled with anger, criticism, and negativity, they are the burning coal. And if you keep holding on, you'll be the one who gets hurt first. I remember an elderly woman named Agnes I met during a tea meditation session in California. She was over 80. She moved slowly and gently, but her eyes carried the weight of years. She told me every week I go to my eldest son's house for dinner, and every time I come home in tears. He mocks my beliefs, says I'm superstitious, outdated, weak, but I keep going. Because he's my son, and because I'm afraid that if I stop, I'll be a bad mother. I said nothing, because she had already gone silent, and I knew she had just met the edge of her heart. The following week, she didn't go. Instead, she sat alone on her porch with a cup of jasmine tea and the soft breeze of a quiet evening. She told me, "For the first time in years, I exhaled and my heart didn't tighten." You see, letting go of a toxic relationship is not cutting off love. It's not ingratitude. It's not betrayal. It's simply being honest with your own heart. It's choosing to nourish your inner stillness instead of swallowing hurt. It's making space so that healthier, more loving connections can enter. You don't have to live in the storm just to prove you're a good person. You just have to return to the calm so the light inside you can shine again. And that light, it doesn't need anyone else's permission. It only needs you to protect it by letting go at the right time. Part 9. Letting go of regret. Forgiving your past self. There are things you never tell anyone, not because they're too big, but because they're too old. Too old to bring up again, yet they've never truly left your heart. It might have been a rushed decision, a harsh word that hurt someone, a chance you didn't take, an action you no longer recognize as your own. And then, time passed. On the outside, you carried on. You smiled. You talked. You showed up for your children and grandchildren, for your friends. But somewhere deep inside, there was a quiet sadness that never had a name. A weight, a hidden scar, a whisper of "I should have." I've met many elders who lived their entire lives with that quiet ache. They didn't blame others. They quietly blamed themselves. And the saddest part, they believed they didn't deserve peace. Have you ever felt that way? That your mistake was too deep to be forgiven? That it's too late to make things right? That because you once messed up, you now have to live the rest of your life quietly carrying the guilt? But my dear friend, the Buddha said, no matter how far you've gone on the wrong path, you always have the right to turn around. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering without pain. It's being able to say, yes, I did that. I'm not proud, but I won't keep punishing myself for it anymore. I remember a man named Martin. He lived alone quietly. For over 30 years, he never mentioned his older brother. Until one day, during a meditation session, he whispered to me, "Truth is, I was the one who hurt him." And after that, I didn't dare go back. He never called, never wrote. Not because he didn't care, but because he believed he didn't deserve to. "I'm tired now," he said. "Tired of running, tired of carrying this for so long. And then he did something very small. He wrote a letter, not to ask for forgiveness from his brother, but to forgive himself. In that letter, he wrote, "I release this," not because it didn't matter, but because I want to live the rest of my life lighter. You see, forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It simply stops the past from controlling the present. Yes, you've made mistakes, but you've also loved. You've fallen, but you've also gotten back up. You've hurt others, but you've also known deep regret. And that regret is proof that you've changed. The Buddha said, "You can search the whole world and not find anyone more deserving of your love than yourself. That includes the you of today and the you of the past when you didn't yet know better or stand stronger or see more clearly." So if there's something you're still carrying, a memory, a guilt, something you've avoided for years, I invite you, Nima, take a gentle breath and quietly say to yourself, "I did the best I could at the time with what I knew. Now, I know better, so I will live better." That is the deepest form of redemption, not self-punishment, but living with more kindness starting today. You don't have to forget. You just have to let go. Because you deserve peace just like anyone else. And maybe, just maybe, from the very place that once hurt the most, a beautiful flower can still grow. If you're brave enough to look back with compassion and gentle enough to finally forgive yourself. Part 10. Letting go of the lie that it's too late. There's one sentence I've heard many times from older people. "I wish I had known this sooner." Or, "I wanted to do it when I was younger, but now it's too late." What's the point? Have you ever thought the same, that a small dream inside you was buried under the dust of time? That at your age you're only supposed to preserve, prepare, and leave behind, not start, explore, or try, I understand. Because that's what society has been whispering to you for decades, softly but persistently, that after 60, 70, even 80, your role is only to support the younger generation, that your chances to grow are over, that the door has already closed. But my dear friend, that's a lie, and not a lie told by others, but one you've quietly repeated to yourself. The Buddha once said, "Each morning we are born again." It's not a metaphor. It's a living truth. Yes, you're no longer in your 20s, but that doesn't mean you're done. If you're still breathing, you're still becoming. I once met an elderly woman named Helen, 88 years old. One day she saw her neighbor's watercolor paintings, vibrant flowers blooming on paper. Something stirred within her, so she bought brushes. She bought paint, and she began to paint. Not to become an artist, not for praise, but simply to feel alive again from the inside. 2 years later, her paintings were displayed at the community center. But the most precious thing wasn't the exhibit. It was the wall inside her that came down. I also remember a man named Jerome, over 80, living alone. One day, while walking through the park, he saw a young man dancing, and he whispered, maybe only to himself, "I used to love movement." A few weeks later, he signed up for Tai Chi, gentle, slow movements. At first his hands trembled, but he said I didn't think I could still feel the beauty of grace. Turns out, I still can. And then there was May, 80 years old. She started a small YouTube channel. Each week, she sat in front of a camera reading fairy tales for children, especially those without grandparents around. She said I thought no one needed my voice anymore, but it turns out quiet hearts were still listening. Do you see? It's too late is just a sentence, not a truth. You can start learning something new. Start writing. Start forgiving. Start believing in kindness again. Start loving yourself more. You don't have to start big. One small step is enough. One blank page. One new song. One soft thought. Why not now? That question. Why not now is the key. Because if not now, when? You don't need to relive your whole life. You just need to live one moment fully with an open heart, and that is enough to bring your life back to bloom. And if you're reading these words, if you still feel something when hearing someone speak from the heart, then please remember, it's not too late. You're simply at a new threshold, and the door is still open. It's not about your age. It's about whether you still believe you're worth continuing the journey. I believe you are, and I hope you believe that too, starting today. Because if you're still breathing, you're still becoming. And if you haven't begun yet, why not now? Dear friend, if any part of this message made you pause, tear up, or gently nod your head, that's the sign. You're still becoming. Age doesn't take away your light. It just invites you to shine in a different way, deeper, softer, truer. And sometimes letting go is the beginning of a whole new chapter of freedom. If these words brought you peace, I invite you, subscribe to the Buddhism Seeds channel and walk this path of awakening with us. Like this video if it touched you. Share it with someone who might need a gentle reminder, and comment below, what are you ready to let go of today? We truly look forward to reading your answer. Because on this journey, we don't have to walk alone.